We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. We're gonna make it look fly with some DIY. Uh-oh, thrift diving.
Hey, what's up? It's Serena Pia from thriftiving.com, which is a podcast, a blog, and a YouTube channel that helps you decorate, improve, and maintain your home with paint, power tools, and thrift stores without sacrificing your budget, the environment, and your style, right? You don't have to sacrifice those things. Welcome to episode 101 of the Thrift Diving Podcast. Today, we are going to be doing an interview with someone that I met very unexpectedly. Her name is Demetric West, and she weaves rugs. And I just happened to run into her. You'll hear the story in a moment during our interview, but I ran into her unexpectedly, and I thought, I got to get you on the podcast because you know how the universe just sort of conspires to put people and things and experiences in your way. When you have a thought, suddenly you meet someone or you see something that just reaffirms that you should be moving in that direction. Well, I had been thinking that I wanted to try weaving. I was watching something on Netflix, just got this idea from something I saw. There was a man who was weaving a basket, like a really cool basket. And I thought, that would be really interesting to try weaving. It kind of reminds me of knitting. Knitting's a kind of weave that you're doing with this yarn. And to have, I don't know, he was using he was making baskets. So making these baskets with I don't even know what you call it, like the wood. I just thought it looked really cool. And so you'll hear in just a moment, I actually met somebody who does weaving. And so when the universe conspires to put someone in your path who you are just thinking I'm interested in weaving and people that weave, and suddenly she was in front of me. So I wanted to bring her on and talk about how she got started and how you could get started and why she even took up weaving. Because remember, for 2023, it's about my three words. Remember, connection, flow, and simplicity. And I think for flow, when you're trying things that you really love and you lose yourself in that moment, it makes you happy. And sometimes you don't know what that flow is, and you have to go outside of what you already know and try different things. So this episode is really to inspire you if you want to try weaving, but if it's not weaving, it's just the idea that sometimes you just have to go outside of what you know, or maybe go back to what you used to love when you were a child and re-explore those things, because that's where your flow comes from. And I have to tell you, the reason why I didn't do episode 101 last week is because I was having a temper tantrum. I was kind of feeling a little down about the fact that I had reached my 100th episode. I was so proud of that fact that I'd been able to continue every single week, with the exception of maybe a few weeks, but every single week showing up. And I had said at the beginning of the episode, hey, stick around to the end of the episode because I've got a special giveaway. And there was one person who actually entered the giveaway. So what I was doing was I was asking you to listen to the podcast, go to Apple, Google, Stitcher, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, and leave me a review. And all you have to do is tell me what you think of the podcast, take a screenshot, send it to me, and that way I didn't miss it. And that's your official entry. So I was hoping that more people would have gotten to the end of the episode and that they would have entered, and nobody did. The whole week went by and nobody did. And I was like, you know what? I'm not showing up this week. I literally had a little temper tantrum. I said, I'm not showing up this week. My feelings are hurt. Nobody's listening to this podcast. And then Christy had sent me a message with her screenshot saying that she loved the podcast. She loves my voice. And I thought, thank you, Christy. Thank you for giving me faith to continue, because I just was in my feelings about not really, I don't know, nobody got that far in the podcast. And then, of course, I realized, well, Serena, you should have said it up front. Sometimes people don't get to the end of the podcast. And who are you to, have this ego that, woe is me. Nobody listens to my podcast. So why should I even do it? Why should I even show up every week? And I realized the reason why I show up every week is because I love doing it. And I know there's not very many of you out there listening, but there's some that are listening right now who look forward to listening to my podcast every week. And for that, I'm sorry that I didn't show up. I was stomping my feet silently in my head. I'm not showing up anymore because I don't think anyone's listening. So, yeah. But anyway, Christy, you won the $100. I'm going to PayPal that to you or whatever is the best way to get that money to you. And I hope that she buys something really cool. I want to see or I want to hear about what she treated herself to. That makes me really happy to be able to send that to her. All right, so let's jump into today's episode. Before we do, I will tell you, I had some technical difficulties during this conversation with Demetric. I keep calling her Dominique. It's Demetric. And towards the end of the conversation, it got cut off right at the point where I was asking her about the materials, what she recommends. And so when I get to the end of her interview, I will just kind of jump in and just relay what she had said about those materials and tools that you need to get started if you decide that you want to be a weaver. But you don't have to be interested in weaving to enjoy this episode. I think you have to listen to the message of why she discovered weaving again and how it made her feel and why she really needed it at that point in her life. So let's jump into that interview right now. I'm going to start with how we met because it's just so interesting how we met. So
yes.
So my mom lives in this, above 55 senior community. And she's like, hey, I want to introduce you to this woman that works over here in the store on the first floor.
That's
so
right.
I go in there. And so you were like, yes, I know your daughter. So you had conversations with my mom previously. Yes. And somehow it was discovered that you had already seen some of my videos on
That's
Thrift.
Right. That's right. What a small world.
Yes, it was a small world. So she's like, I got to introduce you. And you were just so nice and sweet. And you told me something really interesting that I thought, okay, I got to get you on the podcast. We have to talk about this. So you're Demetric.
That's right.
Yes. And you are a weaver. You make rugs.
I make rugs.
You make rugs.
I make rugs.
When I found out about this, I thought, oh my gosh, literally days before I was watching some show on Netflix or one of those streaming platforms. And there was a man who was weaving a basket. And I thought, that actually looks really interesting. Like, I think I would like to weave a basket. And then it was sort of a fleeting thought. And then literally days later, I meet you who said, I weave rugs. I was like, okay, the universe is telling me something here. I need to explore this. So I want to start with you. How did you get involved with weaving rugs? And have you always been a creative person?
I feel like I have always been a creative person, even when I was a little girl. From elementary school, my favorite classes was always art classes, going to shop, anything like working with clay. I do kind of like a little bit of everything. I'm always open to learning new things. For me, I always felt that I was very creative as a child. I was always trying to make something. And I just kind of gravitated to those classes, those art classes in school. Yes.
Yeah. It's really interesting when people grow up, they become adults and they have this question of what's my life purpose and what am I supposed to be doing? And how am I supposed to find hobbies? I don't know what I'm interested in. Yeah. I always tell people, start with where you were when you were a kid.
That's right.
And I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking about it because it's so true. Like how you were as a kid is what you should be doing throughout your entire life.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
And I feel like if you're not honoring those things that were true when you were a kid, you're not happy. Like you don't find happiness in your life because you're not doing those things that you weren't influenced as a kid. You weren't influenced by, well, I don't know. I don't think I'm creative enough. All these negative things that we as adults tell ourselves. Right. It's just, I love doing this thing and I'm going to do it. And it's not a matter of how good am I going to be? Is it going to turn out? You just start creating.
That's right.
You want to try new things. So at what point did you decide I'm going to start weaving rugs? Where did you get that inspiration from?
Okay, well, it really all started when I was at a very turning point in my life. I had gotten really sick and I had to leave my job. And I really didn't know what to do with myself because I kind of identified myself as a person through my job. And a
Mhm.
lot of us do that at some point in our lives. We think that we are what we do. And I don't really believe that's what who we are as people. So I was at home and trying to heal myself and just trying to figure out what I was going to do with myself. And I'll never forget. It seemed like I had fallen into this ritual of buying rugs every year for the house.
Mhm.
So I would go and buy new bathroom rugs, new kitchen rugs, and I was looking for a new rug to go into my bedroom that I can just step down on when I wake up in the morning so my feet wouldn't be cold. It started off just that simple, something just that simple. And I was gathering all these rugs up in my apartment and I said, it really is a shame that it seems like every year I'm buying new rugs.
Mhm.
And so I went to a department store and I was looking for a rug and I saw this rug and it looked like it was something that was hand woven. And I bought it and I was like, that's what I want because growing up as a child, that's what I saw in my grandmother's house. Like all the rugs were these braided rugs and things,
Yes.
and they were made. I didn't know that, but they were made rugs. And so I went to the store and I bought this rug and I washed it. Well, it just disintegrated, after I washed it.
Oh no.
And it made me so angry because I spent a lot of money for the rug. And I just said, you know what? I can make this rug. I'm not spending another dime on these rugs. I can make rugs. And I remembered, and I'm going to tell you this, and everybody is a weaver. And I believe that because it really starts when we were kids. We all had that class that we went to where we learned how to make that pot holder. I don't know if
Yes.
you remember that.
Yes.
Okay, well, then
Sixth grade.
already know how
Sixth
to
grade.
weave. You already know how to weave because they gave
Remember
you
that.
this little square and you wove the yarn or whatever it was. Well, that was weaving. And
Mm.
I remembered that, and I said, I can make this rug. I know I can make me a rug. And so the very first thing I started doing, I said, was I have to find me a loom. And I just started Googling online and I found this shop on Etsy. This lady, her husband makes these beautiful looms, these maple looms, and I'll give you all that information for you.
Yes, please do.
And she's still out there making beautiful looms. Her husband is still making these beautiful looms, and I still have the exact loom. I bought that loom and I contacted my family members and I said, if you have any old sheets or anything like that in your home, please wash them and send them to me. And
Mm.
my mother gave me all of her old sheets that she was no longer using that she had in her linen closet, and so did my aunt. And I just looked at that video because I have this 27 by 47-inch loom, and I was like, it was there in my mind. I knew how to do it. But I was like, I remember doing this as a child. And I just started looking at a video to warp the loom. And I started making rugs from that loom, and I am still making rugs from the loom. That's how it got started. I got tired of buying rugs for my home. And I got tired of throwing them away, and they would just disintegrate when you
Mhm.
would wash them or put them in a wash machine. And that's how I got started. And then I remembered when I was a child, we were taken to the library, and there was the librarian showed us how she turned wool into yarn, and
Oh.
she gave us this field trip to her house. Her name was Miss Cohey. I'll never forget her, and she had a loom in her home, and she showed us how to weave. She showed us how to weave at her home. She had all these rugs that she
Wow.
was making, and she showed us how to weave during that field trip as a
So it
child.
was so you had that experience in your memory, but you hadn't,
Oh
but
yes,
maybe life just got in the way. You're focused
absolutely.
on like, whatever illness you're trying to get over. And then suddenly
That's right.
it's this light bulb moment. I think that there's something about life, like when you're supposed to do something, it's almost like it just comes to you and you just suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be doing, I can do this. I said in a recent podcast when I was talking about sewing, something similar happened to me. Growing up, I'd always been a very creative kid. I did drawing. I always wanted to be a writer and
Yes,
go figure. Like I'm a blogger and I do projects
yes.
on YouTube. And there was a moment after I graduated from University of Maryland and I was in a temporary job. So I was
Hmm.
working at, like, back then it was called Nextel. So it was a temp job. And I'm sitting there and these women, I just overheard them saying, yeah, we're going to go to the fabric store at lunch. And I didn't know these women. I wasn't like really close to them, but my head
Hmm.
snapped back and I'm like, fabric store? What?
Oh
Hold
yeah.
up. You're okay. I have to go with you. Like, that's how significant it was. It was just that thing that just, it was like the snap of a finger. I want to do that. And let me tell you, Demetric, I went and got a sewing machine. I did go with them. I bought fabric. I bought patterns. I made my first skirt. It was like this little wrap skirt.
Oh, yeah.
And from there, it then snowballed into, I want to make clothes. And so I would spend my weekends learning how to make pants and dresses.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
Yeah. And then it went from pants and dresses to silk purses. I used to make silk purses. Then once I had and I wish I had it here because I just made one recently, right between the week between Christmas and New Year's, I made a silk purse. And it had been like 20 years, 19 years since maybe not quite. It was a long time, at least 17 years since I'd made a purse. But then once I had gotten pregnant with my oldest son, it turned into making baby carriers and shoes. And through all that time, I remember thinking, I would love to work for myself, but I just didn't know how I could take this passion for creating and turn it into a full-time job. At that time we were living with my mother-in-law. I didn't really have very much income coming in from this, I think it was a full-time, but it was a temporary job, maybe 2-3 months. And I didn't know how I was going to make that happen. But because I stayed true with this desire to create, it then led me to, and to write, it then led me to blogging. And then blogging, when we bought a house, led me into blogging about, I've got this house and I guess I can fill it with thrift store things. And I guess I can paint furniture. And then once I kind of figured that, I can use tools, I can do projects. So it all started from that one moment. We're going to the fabric store. That really was like the beginning, I would say, of me acting on the creativity that was always there. Yeah. And I think for anybody that's listening to this, if there's someone who has always loved being creative, but there's this time in their life where they kind of took a break from it and forgot their creativity, hopefully this podcast is the message. Hey, go create whatever it is that you want to create. Just go do it because it's there in you. It's there in you. And all it takes is a disintegrating rug to make you realize, wait, I can do better.
I tell people all the time, and people see my rugs and they see what I'm doing sometimes, and they're just like, oh my God, I could never do that. And I said, it's already in you. You just don't know it is already there. All you have to do is tap back into it and just cultivate it. That's all you have to do. It's already there. And it's so easy. It's not as hard as you may think it is. Once you start weaving the rug, it's just like, it's such a natural movement. Like even when you're sitting there and I always have like something to drink, and I'm always, have my little cup of lemonade or whatever. And the way that your body moves when you're weaving, it's such a natural thing. It's just so hard to explain, but it's just such a comfortable thing. And you just feel so, I just feel so alive and really authentic about who I am as a person. It makes me feel so good to just sit down and to take something and to turn it into something that I can use around my house or give it as a gift. And my grandmother did that. My mother's mother is a quilter.
Oh, wow.
And my mother is a quilter. I have a beautiful quilt that she made for me years ago. And my grandmother was the same way. My grandmother could make anything. She made all of the school clothes for the kids. She made, anything that was needed. People just didn't go to the store back then. They just made what they had. They used what they had around the house. So with these rugs, you can use anything you have. You can use old sheets. You can use jeans. You can use anything that you want to use,
It's funny that you mentioned about using old jeans, because in episode 2 of the Thrift Diving podcast, there was a woman named Marati that I interviewed, and she was talking about the complete waste that we have with clothing, right? Like, buying new clothes, we know that it's got an environmental impact. So
that's right.
It's kind of frowned upon, like, okay, when you're buying a piece of clothing, it's new, guess what? You're actually wasting a lot more resources, water,
that's right,
fuel, and even when we donate stuff, not everything ends up on the shelf at the thrift store. Some of that stuff is, so there's a lot of waste with buying and even donating. But what you're talking about is, instead of maybe donating those pants, maybe you should cut them up and use them to weave something cool.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny because in my last podcast, I believe it was the previous podcast that I just released, I was talking about just getting rid of clothes. Like, here are the 7 categories of clothing that you should just get rid of, right? And one of those are these jeans that they're your skinny jeans and you haven't worn them for 5 years.
Yeah.
Get rid of them. Guess what? You're probably not going to fit back into them. So I'm glad that we're talking, because this is the episode that tells you what to do with those jeans. Don't just donate them.
Oh, great. That's right.
So let's talk about, like, what are some of your favorite materials that you weave with? I know you said you actually go to the thrift store too and look for for garments and sheets. So what are you buying from the thrift store that you're then cutting into strips, and how are you cutting them? Are you cutting them to be a certain size?
Yes, actually, what I look for at first, early on, like 10 years ago when I first started making rugs, I would just go to the thrift store and buy old bed sheets. That's what I did. It was just, they were cheap and they were plentiful. And so I would go and get old bed sheets and just wash them and dry the heck out of them and make sure nothing was in them. I don't know if I would do that now.
I know,
But
you're like, I am not bringing bed bugs into this
I
house.
know. That's what I said. I wouldn't do it now, but 10 years ago, that's exactly what I did. I think that bed sheets really make the best rugs, because there are so many different patterns and colors that go throughout the rug as you're weaving it. So bed sheets. But when COVID hit and I was going to the thrift store, it seemed like people seem to have gotten rid of a lot of their, I think quilters maybe have gotten rid of a lot of their fabric, because I bought just so much fabric that I couldn't even believe that people were giving away bolts and bolts of fabric away. And it was all cotton. And so I still have fabric right now. So what I look for is t-shirts, great for making rugs. T-shirt rugs are fantastic. So really nice knit t-shirts or cotton t-shirts, jeans, of course. But I have so much bolted fabric that I purchased during the whole pandemic. It seems like people just got rid of their stash. And that's what I've been using, just trying to use up the fabric that I have. I don't want to buy any more until I finish up with what I have, because I have so much right now. But for me, I just like the cotton. I like it because you can wash the rug and just lay it flat to dry. And when you're making your rug, you would cut it into strips. Let me just show you real quick. I have it right here.
Definitely.
So I'm working on the rug right now. And here are just some of the strips here.
Okay, so is that about an inch and a half?
It's about, this one is about 2 inches.
2 inches, okay.
But normally I would do an inch and a half.
Okay.
And, you got to make them really long. You got to make them long because you're going to join it with another piece of, see, I have all different kinds. Like, here's a bed sheet. Here's an old bed sheet.
Nice.
Here, so I just use anything that I can get my hands on. This is a piece of fabric that I thought, this came on a huge bolt that's taller than I am. Wow. And I paid like $7 for it at the thrift store. And it's just really nice, strong cotton.
Yeah.
So this rug that I'm making right now is going to last for several years because the materials I'm using are really good.
Now, are you thinking about selling your rugs? Have you sold them?
The thing about it is, like, when I first got into making rugs, I made so many rugs and I gave them all away because, as I told you, I was trying to make these tester rugs because I was a little self-conscious about it, because I was like, I don't know if people are going to like my rugs. Maybe people won't like it. And people ended up loving them. And then when I wanted to start selling them, the thing that kind of puzzled me a little bit is that people, they want the rugs. But I think that sometimes, like, I can't sell a rug to a person for $10 or $15.
Exactly. Yes.
Because it takes a lot of time,
Right.
and that's why I get all of my material from the thrift store, because I would want to pass that savings on to someone who would want to buy the rug. And I think that sometimes some of us have gotten so used to not having really good quality, and we'll go out there and spend. We'll pay $50 for a rug that is going to disintegrate while you wash it one time.
Right.
But sometimes some people don't want to pay $50 for a rug that you handmade. Now, of
Mhm.
course, some people are just like, look, I'm going to buy that rug from you. And, if you want $50 for that rug, I'm going to give you $50 for that rug because I know it's going to last. That's been one of the struggles,
Mhm.
because I don't want to give them away. I love them. I put a lot of work into them. I really do. But I do want to sell them at a decent price that's not hard on a person, because we are living in some times right now where everything seems to be high, and
Oh,
that's where
yes.
passing on that savings. That's why I get things from the thrift store, so that
Mhm.
I don't want to be able to go out and spend $40 or $50 on some fabric at the fabric store. How much would I charge someone for a rug then?
Right, exactly.
That would be
Exactly.
ridiculous. Exactly. So, but I am thinking about selling my rugs. I've actually gotten to a point where I'm confident enough to be able to say, you know what, Demetric, what are you doing? You can do this. People see your rugs and they love your rugs. And
Exactly.
why don't you go ahead on and sell your rugs? And my family has really encouraged me and gotten behind me and said, you know what, you sell your rugs, just sell your rugs. Some people will buy them, some people may not buy them, but just do it because you love it. And someone out there is going to love it.
I completely understand what you're saying because, when I started doing furniture makeovers, this was
Mhm.
years ago when I first started just getting furniture for the house, doing
Oh
furniture
yeah.
makeovers. At some point, a friend and I decided that we were going to start selling at a local barn, back
Uh-huh.
in, I think it's in Frederick. So we're like, oh, we're going to rent a space. We'll do some furniture makeovers, find some vintage items that we can sell in our booth, and we're going to make money. Well, a few pieces sold, but the amount of time and effort and care that you put into that project, it's not going to be for everybody.
Yeah, that's
You're
right.
going to have, and I think that's where you have to find your audience, right? Like you will
That's
have
right.
those Walmart shoppers that are like, look, I'm just going to go buy a rug for $10.
Right.
That's all I want. I'm not going to pay for your creativity and your craft. But
Hmm.
then you have people that are going to pay you for your time and
Hmm.
effort because they love what you do. They like the unique factor of what you've put together because what you do is going to be completely different than what other people do, right? There's
That's
whatever
right.
you do, it's, Demetric, this is a Demetric rug. This is
That's
not, a somebody down the street. And once they love you and they see you and they want to support you, then they're gonna support you. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind is that our product isn't going to be for everybody. Like my
that's
YouTube
right.
channel is not for everybody. So I can't
Hmm.
expect, everybody to want to watch it. It's for a certain customer, a certain
That's right.
client, for you, a certain client, a certain customer, certain viewer, reader for me. So how long does it take you to make one rug? I'm thinking
Yeah.
for me, for my projects, sometimes it's hard to say if someone says, oh, how long did that take? Well, I mean, do I count the time it took to pull the tools out? The time to like do all the prep stuff? But generally, how long does it take you to make one rug?
If I have all of my fabric and all my preparations together to make the rug, and I'm just weaving the rug every day, I can weave a rug. If I'm working on it every day, I can do it in like maybe about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay. Yeah, so
Sometimes
that
even,
amount of time, that's a lot of time. I mean, it's
yeah,
not a lot, but it's still a lot of time that you're
yeah.
not charging $10 for a rug.
That's right. And the thing about it is when, depending upon the type of weave you do, I do a twining weave, which is a up and over and under, up and
Mhm.
under and over type of weave, and it gives the rug texture. So
Mm.
I don't know if you looked closely at some of the pictures I sent you. That's why I did some close-ups. It kind of almost looks like it's braided a little bit,
Okay.
and I like that look,
Yeah.
but it actually isn't braided. It's called twining. And so, but if I stick at it, like I've done a rug in a day. If I'm just sitting there doing the rug all day long, I'm doing it. But I like for my rugs to look really neat. I like to make
Right.
sure that the lines are straight. And it just depends on how you make the rug. Because, some people can weave a rug and it may not be as straight and it may have some quirks with it as any handmade item would.
Right.
But I really like to try to take the time to make it the best rug that I possibly can every single time. And
Hmm.
anytime you make anything handmade, it's going to have some quirks. It's going to have that handmade feel to it. It's going to have a few little quirks, but it's worth it in the end, because those first rugs I made, they look brand new. I'm going to take a picture of the rug. I gave my mother the first rug I made. Tomorrow I'm going to take a picture of it. I'm going to send it to you so you can see
Yes,
it. You're
please
not going to
do.
believe it. It's 10 years old.
So I know it seems like a very abrupt ending to our conversation, and that's because it was. We were going strong, and I was just about to ask her, hey, tell me about the tools and materials that people need in order to get started. And she started telling me, and then we just started hearing this clicking noise that was just, I don't know. We even disconnected. We tried to come back to the call, and it just wouldn't stop. And I thought maybe we should do it on another day. And then that's when I ended up leaving and going out of town, and we just didn't have a chance to do it. But I feel like I captured enough information, and I captured the spirit of her love of weaving. And I want you to really just notice how something that inspired her really kind of lay dormant for a number of years. But it was when she was in that time of trying to heal and recover that she started rediscovering her creativity again. And so the message for you is, if there's something that you have been, I don't know, wanting to explore again, maybe you just had this idea that maybe you should get into weaving again, or maybe you should get into sewing like you used to do with your grandmother, or, something that you really gravitated towards when you were younger, something creative. Well, it doesn't even have to be creative, just something that really spoke to you when you were younger, and life got in the way and you just kind of forgot about it. And now maybe you're older, you have more time, maybe you're healing from a health situation, or you just need something as a hobby because you want to fall back into something that you love and you want that flow. See, there we go, that word for 2023. You want that flow in your life again. Then try something that spoke to you when you were a kid, something creative. For Demetric, it was weaving. And I loved listening to her talk about this and actually re-listening to it again because she had so much passion for weaving and how it's just this natural flow. So I will leave down below in the comments or in the description a link for some of the things that she had talked about, the tools and materials, the pictures. I'm going to see if I can get some pictures from her and have it linked here to the podcast so that you can see some of her work, and also to the loom that she purchased on Etsy. I'll leave a link there too for anybody that wants to check it out. And I will leave some videos. I'm going to check these out myself. I'll find some videos down below and I'll leave those links. So if you want to look at some tutorials on weaving, this might be a good place to start. Maybe you'll discover a new passion that you didn't even know you had. All right, that's what I have for you this week. I want to know from you, were you inspired by this episode? Do you like hearing from regular everyday people like yourself and how they got started with their creativity? And oh, actually one other thing I forgot to mention. I did say that we had been cut off during the conversation and she was just starting to talk about what it is that she needed. And it was actually not a very long list. The main thing, which I just mentioned, was the loom. And I believe she said that loom was about $200. It was a handmade loom from a creator on Etsy. I don't remember where the creator lives. And it looked pretty tall, actually. And she was saying that you could get different size looms for the size rugs that you want. And I think maybe some of the looms can do like a variety of different sizes. So if you want larger rugs, of course, you'd have to get a larger loom. But the one that she sent to me, I mean, it looked like it was probably about 4 feet tall. It wasn't very wide. And then it looks like it's got these rods and that keeps it kind of sturdy. And then you just sort of weave your rug around these rods. So it looked pretty awesome to me. I actually thought this might even be a good DIY project for me to build my own loom. I'm sure there's instructions out there somewhere on how to build your own loom. So I'll find it and I'll leave it down below. But some of the other things that she said, you definitely need some good scissors. And if you remember in the conversation, she loves cotton. She said polyester doesn't work very well. So try to stick to the cotton t-shirts, the cotton bed sheets. It washes up really well. And that's pretty much it. There wasn't really too many things to get started. So if you're somebody that's looking for a craft that doesn't have a huge cost to get into it, you don't have to store a lot, just maybe a few sheets, a few t-shirts, and a loom. This might be a new hobby that you can choose. All right, that's what I got for you for episode 101. I will see you next episode.
Thrift diving. Find it ugly, make it pretty. Paint a power tools, alright. Saving money.